organizations. 31 of them
Good
are United Nations
afternoon.
entities. The rest are non-UN. And we're talking about crucial bodies here. For example,
This
the
is
UNFCCC,
an update
the United
on
Nations
the
Framework for
Minnesota
the
ice
Prevention of
shooting.
Climate Change. This body gave us the Paris Accords. They also organize the COP summits every year. And yesterday, Trump just walked out of it. He also left UN Women, which fights for gender equality. He also left the UN Population Fund, which focuses on children's health, meaning the United States will no longer fund these bodies. And for the record, even North Korea is not part of the Population Fund, and that's a bona fide rogue state. Next is reason number 3. Imperial military tendencies. The US has bombed 7 countries in the last 12 months. They also kidnapped the sitting head of state. But Trump is not done yet. He has threatened Cuba and Colombia with regime changes. He's also asking them and how is he achieving this? With a ludicrous amount of defense spending. Even before Trump, the US had a massive military budget. It was higher than the next 10 countries combined. The US defense budget was higher than the next 10 countries combined. But Trump raised it to more than $900 billion for 2026. You could round it up to $1 trillion. $1 trillion on defense spending, but he's not done yet. Trump has now proposed a $1.5 trillion military budget for 2027. To put that in context, that's more than the GDP of countries like Turkey, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, Poland, and Switzerland. The spending alone is worrying, but if you add the threats and the bombing, the picture is clear. America is militarizing and expanding, yet nobody is
Yeah,
saying
we
what
are.
this.
Unfortunately,
These are not the actions of
unfortunately,
a
we
responsible
are.
country. This is a rogue state. A state that does not care about lives, livelihood, or laws. And if we normalize this, it may open the floodgates of chaos, violence, and imperialism.
Uh,
For our next story, let me ask you a question. What is a rogue state? I'm sure you've heard this term before. American officials call most of their enemies rogue. North Korea is rogue, Iran is rogue, and until recently, Russia was rogue. But tonight, we'll flip the question. Is the United States of America a rogue country? We say yes. And we'll give you 3 reasons why. Number 1, rogue countries do not treat their citizens well. There is no due process, no effective law enforcement, and no value for human life. And we saw precisely that in Minneapolis yesterday. This is a city in northeastern US. President Donald Trump has deployed hundreds of ICE agents there. ICE stands for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Trump has charged them with capturing and deporting illegal immigrants. But here's the thing. ICE is targeting not just illegal migrants, they're also harassing US citizens, especially citizens of color. As a result, there were major protests in Minneapolis. This incident happened in a residential area. A woman had parked her car across the street. You can see protesters on either side. Soon ICE officers turned up in full combat gear. They asked the woman to step out of the car and look at what happened next.
and mind you, the one who pow-powed the car was 10 feet away from the damn car. Lying bastards. They are criminals.
What are you doing here? What did you do? They shot and killed her. The victim has been identified.
Why would they have an ad? Damn it.
Is defending this murder. Listen to what Donald Trump said. The woman driving the car was very disorderly, obstructing and resisting, who then violently, willfully, and viciously ran over the ICE officer who seemed
I
to
gotta
shoot
pause
her
this for a
in
second.
self-defense. You guys know there's a
Dang it.
video, right? The ICE agent had ample space to jump aside, plus he was not hurt at all. If he wanted to stop the car, why not shoot
That
the
right
car
there is
before
an
he stopped
MF
the
and
number
Y.
plates or inform the local police?
There was nobody in front of that
The
car.
ICE agents did none of that. Instead, they fatally shot an innocent civilian. That too possibly twice because you
There
could
was
hear
nobody in
shots
front of the
from
dang car,
So it
man.
is possible.
They need
that
to
the
stop
ICE agents
lying.
fired twice. Imagine the brutality. Imagine the sense of impunity. All
Sorry.
fueled by the U.S. President himself.
There was nobody in front of that car,
This
man.
was the result of the heavy
And I've looked at it from
militarization of
3
ICE.
different
And I have
angles.
some numbers for you. $1 billion to expand ICE detention capacity. He has allocated $30 billion to hire new officers. The agency has a target. They must arrest 3,000
Okay, let me share
illegal
this.
migrants every day.
Give me a second, y'all.
Naturally,
Okay, I'm
people
back.
in custody. Nearly 75% of
Dang,
these people
really?
had no criminal history whatsoever. Plus 14 people were shot last year. Shot, not killed. Does this sound like the land of freedom? To us, it sounds like a police state. And that's one reason why the US qualifies as a rogue country. Reason number 2, a detachment from the global community. Rogue states are not active contributors to the world.
Man,
They
let
do
me
not
see
care
something.
about common goals like climate action or preserving cultural symbols. And again, the United States fits the bill. Yesterday, Trump pulled America out of 66 global organizations. 31 of them are United Nations entities. The rest are non-UN. And we're talking about crucial bodies here. For example, the UNFCCC, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. This body gave us the Paris Accords. They also organize the COP summits every year. And yesterday, Trump just walked out of it. He also left UN Women, which fights for gender equality. He also left the UN Population Fund, which focuses on children's health. The United States no longer fund these bodies. For the record, even North Korea is not part of the Population Fund, and that's a bona fide rogue state. Next is reason number 3.
Talk about it.
Imperial military tendencies. The U.S. has bombed 7 countries in the last 12 months.
Yep.
They also
What he
kidnapped
did was a kidnapping. Yes, the hell it
But
was.
Trump is not done yet.
And people
He has
need to
threatened
accept
Cuba
that.
and Colombia with regime changes. He's also asking Denmark to give up Greenland. And how is he achieving this? With a ludicrous amount of defense spending. Even before Trump, the U.S. had a
And ladies and gentlemen, this is first post. After first post, I'm going to either go to NBC News or ABC News on updates on Minneapolis. Stick around.
massive military budget for 2027. To put that in context, that's more than the GDP of countries like Turkey, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, Poland, and Switzerland. The spending alone is worrying, but if you add the threats and the bombing, the picture is clear. America is militarizing and expanding, yet nobody is saying the obvious. These are not the actions of a responsible country. This is a rogue state. A state
Talk
that
about
does
it.
not care about
Unfortunately,
lives,
unfortunately, we are a rogue state.
and if we normalize this, it may open the floodgates of chaos, violence, and imperialism. For our next story, let me ask you a question. What is a rogue state? I'm sure you've heard this term before. American officials call most of their enemies rogue. North Korea is rogue, Iran is rogue, and until recently, Russia was rogue. But tonight, we'll flip the question. Is the United States of America a rogue country? We say yes. And we'll give you 3 reasons why. Number 1, rogue countries do not treat their citizens well. There is no due process, no effective law enforcement, and no value for human life. And we saw precisely that in Minneapolis yesterday. This is a city in northeastern US. President Donald Trump has deployed hundreds of ICE agents there. ICE stands for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Trump has charged them with capturing and deporting illegal immigrants. But here's the thing. ICE is targeting not just illegal migrants, they're also harassing US citizens, especially citizens of color. As a result, There were major protests in Minneapolis.
Okay, I did
This
get it.
incident happened in a residential area. A woman had parked her car across the street. You can see protesters on either side. Soon, ICE officers turned up in full combat gear. They asked the woman to step out of the car and look at what happened next.
Yeah, and that's what they are. They are criminals. Cause that woman could have been saved, and they let that woman bleed out.
They shot and killed her. The victim has been identified as Renee Nicole Good, a U.S. citizen and the mother of a 6-year-old. What was her crime? That she tried to drive away. What's worse, the president is defending this murder. Listen to what Donald Trump said. The woman driving the car was very disorderly, obstructing.
Okay, they're just replaying this. I'm gonna go to NBC News for updates.
He does know there's a video, right? The ICE agent had ample space to jump aside, plus he was not hurt at all. If he wanted to stop the car, why not shoot the tires or maybe track the number plates or inform the local police? The ICE agents did none of that. Instead, they fatally shot an innocent civilian. That too possibly twice, because you can hear 2 gunshots in the video. So it is possible that the ICE agents fired twice. Imagine the brutality, imagine the sense of impunity, all fueled by the US President himself. And the fact is, this is not a random accident. This was the result of the heavy militarization of ICE. And I have some numbers for you. Trump has allocated $45 billion to expand ICE.
Okay, she just said it earlier. We're gonna go to NBC News, y'all.
The agency has a tough.
I haven't been to the grocery store in months because this delivery service offers hundreds of high-quality, non-GMO.
The logical conclusion would be to follow that procedure and allow Minnesota to participate. And that's
This
where
is
we started yesterday. And it's one of the reasons I came out here, and I'm not going to criticize that because that was the proper process. And I'm going
Tim
to
Tom has Messi likes to call him.
and it's a very difficult task. I think we all know what can happen here, to calmly wait until all the facts come out. I think you in this room are seeing the gravity of this situation by not allowing Minnesota to participate, and the prejudgment that's already been made by leadership creates a very, very dangerous situation. And that's why, once again, I'm going to reiterate to our federal partners, simply let us be part of this. Use our professional folks. They will gain you the credibility and the trust of Minnesotans to believe the work that you're doing is honest, and it's not just a whitewash to backfill a predeceived notion. All right, so I got 10.
That the state can do to put in additional protection around schools or to allow for additional e-learning days for these situations?
Yeah, it's interesting, Dana, that you would ask that. We were just, as we were coming in here discussing, someone asked about that, and they mentioned Ruby Bridges, the Little Rock folks, about escorting people in. We have not determined that yet, but it is a situation that we're going to have to explore. As I said again, the thing that cut me deeply was watching what happened in our schools and the chaos. And I was on with Commissioner Chet this morning as he's talking to folks from St. Cloud to Duluth about what they think about today. Should we be in classes today and tomorrow in those schools, or does it pose a potential risk? And so we're trying to figure that out. I think many of the things and the lessons we learned during COVID is local communities and local schools being able to make some of these decisions in the long run probably gets us better outcomes, but we are deeply concerned with that. I'm going to come back, and as soon as we get any more information from all of you, we'll be in front of you again. I will reiterate, many of you know my wife Gwen, the First Lady's an English and literature teacher. We were talking about some of this, and she got asked the question, and it was when will all of this end? And what Gwen said, it will end when enough people say it will end. And I think that is sage advice. And then I
Mhm.
couldn't help but thinking, and it scares me a little bit. I heard those words. We remembered, many of us in here in sophomore, and we read it, that the party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most important directive. It certainly feels like that in this moment. And so I want Minnesotans to not believe that I'm telling you not to be angry, not to be scared, not to be feeling a little bit hopeless in this moment. But I would also say this, and I saw it last night, I saw it during George Floyd, I've seen it throughout our history. When things looked really bleak, it was Minnesota's first that held that line for the nation on that July 3rd, 1863. And I think now we may be in that moment, that the nation's looking to us to hold the line on democracy, to hold the line on decency, to hold the line on accountability, and more than that, to rise up as neighbors and simply say, we can look out for one another. We can have differences, but we proved to the world going on 250 years that our democracy could hold. It feels to me like we're at one of those inflection points. That simply asking our government to give us accountability, listen to local leaders, ratchet down the rhetoric, let people feel safe in their
Exactly.
and let's
The people gotta
let's
feel
let our
safe
kids
again.
Go to school without fear. Let's let our kids go to school knowing that tomorrow could be a little better day. And so we're going to work on
Exactly.
that. I'll leave you with this, and I'm not sure when we'll get in front of you next, but to Minnesotans, again, just one last time, don't
What time
give
is
them what they
this?
want.
About
Don't
1?
give them the unrest
What time
that
is
they
it?
want.
1?
Don't give in to allowing them.
Okay, I'm gonna
bring
stay
more
here till
folks in
about
here.
3.
Don't allow them to expand this somewhere else. Rise up, wrap your arms around your neighbors, peacefully express your First Amendment, your constitutional rights, and let's
I'll be
start
right back,
healing,
y'all.
get some answers, and move Minnesota forward. Thank you.
You have been listening to Governor Walz there in the state of Minnesota speaking after a 37-year-old woman was killed in an ICE-involved shooting just about 24 hours ago. You heard the governor there lay out his concerns about the investigation now being led by the FBI moving forward, saying that the state has now been cut out of any cooperation or involvement in that investigation into this shooting that has triggered, as you're seeing here, widespread demonstrations across the state of Minnesota. That's out there.
Not just
From
state of
here
Minnesota,
in
the whole damn
Minneapolis,
country.
vigils throughout the course of the last 18 or 20 hours as well. I want to get to our Stephen Romo, who is there on the ground. He is near the shooting scene in Minneapolis. And Stephen, you heard the governor talk about his concerns for kids in school, with obviously Minneapolis having called off school today, he says. And then the situation on the ground, continued calls for calm. The governor says Minnesotans have met the moment, but he is clearly frustrated, invoking Orwell in these remarks and more.
Yeah, he certainly has. And some of what we heard from Governor Walz, I've heard echoed from people out in Minneapolis today. The idea that the Trump administration has seemed to already have decided what happened before an investigation was complete. We heard that frustration from Governor Walz, and people here protesting it as well. That they've seen that video or these different angles of the video and have already come to a conclusion, and that has sparked a lot of frustration. We've heard different messages from local leaders that we have from federal leaders. Clearly, we heard Governor Walz say that Kristi Noem was basically judge, jury, and executioner yesterday. Some very strong words there. And that same sentiments being echoed here.
And Kristi Noem don't help a damn thing.
Calm. They're chanting right now. They have continued to chant, but things have
They need to tell that BICJ to shut the fuck up.
More protests to come. Hallie?
Stephen Romo, thank you very much for that. I want to get right to our Julia Ainsley, our senior Homeland Security correspondent. And Julia, I understand you have new reporting now on the officer who fired the gun.
That's right. So we don't have the name of the officer yet, but I have been told.
The
to
way I
look
see
at
it,
have in
they
front of
should
me
give his
now,
name.
Details of an incident that the DHS is now saying this officer was involved in June. It was also in Minnesota. It was in Bloomington, Minnesota, when ICE was targeting someone who they said was a convicted sex offender. They were going after this man. This officer, the same officer who fired the shots in this incident yesterday, broke the back window of the car of the target of this man, and then the man went into drive and dragged this officer more than 50 yards. And so this person was later brought up on those charges, and we have the charges. We're going through them now. Hallie, this just came in, so still getting more details.
Okay.
This, of course, is what Kristi Noem was referencing in her press conference, where she says that this officer previously had an incident involving a vehicle. Now, of course, that doesn't necessarily justify or excuse or explain why his behavior may have been to pull the trigger in the position yesterday, but it does inform what that officer's experience was. It also tells us he's operated in Minnesota in the past. This could be his local area of jurisdiction. As we know, they brought in 2,000 officers from field offices.
Okay, I didn't even know that. There we go.
New officers when they cut a lot of the mandatory training
Let me
back.
go make some eat.
They went from a 13-week program to a 6 to 8 week program. This is someone who's been with ICE for a long time, but he was previously dragged more than 50 yards just in June of last year, Hallie.
And this is, again, you make a point, Julie, hang with me for a second here, that Secretary Noem had referenced this. She talked about, in fact, what she has described as a surge in what she described as vehicle rammings or these vehicle-involved incidents with demonstrators, protesters gathering near the site of some of these ICE operations. Let me ask you this, and I know you're still looking through the charges. If you don't know the answer, just let me know. The individual who was behind the wheel in that June incident, Julia, was that person charged with domestic terrorism? That was something that came up frequently over the course of the last day.
That's a great question, Hallie, and when we find out, I will let you know. It does seem that he was charged at least with assault of a federal officer, but that's a great question to be asking. And again, when Noem talks about how this has increased, these incidents of assaults on officers involving vehicles, there's also been an increase in ICE officers approaching people in vehicles, especially people who are U.S. citizens, people who are in traffic stops. We see traffic stops in cities across the country now where ICE is now checking IDs of people who are just on their way to work. So there are more ICE operations involving vehicles than we previously saw in other administrations.
Julie, I'm going to let you go back to looking through those documents, talking with your sources. Come back. I know you're staying to your camera. Let me just tell people what we're seeing on the left side of our screen as we bring in Tom Witter, who I want to talk to in a second here. This is one of the demonstrations that we have seen pop up over the course of the last day, including overnight. We've seen vigils, we've seen singing. In this instance, it's a gathering of people. This is a live shot here. Again, you're looking live at this from our station in Minneapolis, CARE, their helicopter now above the scene. You can see people, some of them holding signs there. Let me bring in Tom now, because Tom, one of the things that you heard from both the governor, the head of public safety in Minnesota, was the immense frustration that they are not a part of, that they are, in their words, being cut out of this federal investigation led by the FBI into this officer-involved shooting. Now, the Minnesota officials say that that is not the norm when this has happened in the past. Can you give us a reality check on that?
Yeah, sure, Hallie. So Governor Tim Walz saying Minnesota must be part of the investigation. That's a quote. As far as in the past, I have seen several instances where state investigators or a local state prosecutor has been involved in a federal investigation. One I covered quite extensively approximately 10 years ago. It was an offshoot of the Boston Marathon bombing investigation involving fatal use of force by a member of law enforcement. And in that instance, it was actually an FBI agent that was involved. And state prosecutors, and because of the different rules that different agencies have, were actually able to publish a quite comprehensive public report that put to rest some of the rumors and misinformation that might have been out there at the time, provided some answers to some questions, and that's something have state investigators been involved. It is also possible, and this is a statement that BCA, the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, Minnesota, kind of a statewide investigative body that has a what is referred to in law enforcement circles as a shooting team, basically a team that investigates solely officer-involved shooting incidents, this being one of them. In those particular instances, Hallie, they can get the file after it's done in order to look at it to see if a prosecution could come up. Now, one of the challenges that they have now is that if they're not in on this part of the investigation, they could go out and interview everybody in that neighborhood. They could go door to door, ask for evidence, ask for video evidence. But in order to conduct a complete investigation, they really need the vehicle, they need the ballistics, and they need other information and perhaps statements from some of the ICE officers that were there on the scene or other ICE agents. If they don't have that, they really can't conduct a comprehensive investigation. So that's what they're referring to there. Minnesota law is different the federal guidelines for DHS when it comes to deadly use of force, there's a word, reasonable, which is included in the DHS deadly use of force. It is different in Minnesota. It's a little bit stricter, so that could be something that comes into play. I think this is going to be really a test for the Minneapolis FBI office. In the course of this investigation, it is one of the largest by geography field offices in the country. So they're going to have to take a hard look at this as far as the information that comes up in the course of their investigation. And then Hallie, will we see the results of that investigation? That remains an open question.
Tom, as you've been speaking, we're showing not just on the left side of your screen that demonstration. I want to be clear where that is. You see those flowers that have been assembled there near either a lamppost or a tree. That is near the scene of the shooting. On the right side of your screen, that's the White House briefing room, and that is because any minute now, we expected it to start at 1 p.m., we should hear from the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt and Vice President J.D. Vance. Leavitt said that Vance will be joining her for this briefing at 1. So again, any minute we expect that to begin. We've got our team, our White House team, in the room for that. Julie, I want to go back to you here, picking up on something Tom referenced and that the governor talked about rather extensively. This issue of what happens at schools here. The governor, in answer to your question, it was kind of tough to hear that I assume was about the possibility of escorting kids to schools, referenced Ruby Bridges, of course escorted by the National Guard decades ago. This question around kids heading to school, their safety, the governor was very clear he doesn't want ICE in schools. And that's coming after word of another operation near a school after this ICE-involved shooting in Minneapolis yesterday.
And I want to get back to also Hallie on your question previously. The man who dragged this officer yesterday, now we're hearing more than 100 yards, swerving around to try to shake him off, was charged with assault of a federal officer, not domestic terrorism. That was a good question. Wanted to get you that answer. What you asked about the schools is the same question I asked Acting ICE Director Todd Lyons just before the school year started. This was when ICE was very prevalent in D.C. I told him I have a kindergartner starting at school that day. Is there anything you can say to guarantee that ICE will not go into public schools in D.C. or around the country? And he could not give me a straight answer. What he said is that they reserve going into schools in times that they are basically targeting someone, that they're not going to do sweeps inside of schools. That doesn't mean they won't arrest parents dropping off children. We saw that in May in Charlotte, North Carolina. We've seen it outside schools in Los Angeles and in Chicago. And we also know that there have been teachers, daycare workers who have been arrested in there. There was a daycare worker arrested in her place of work. So it's not that schools have been obsolete. And just as soon as this administration took place a little over a year ago, Hallie, they rescinded a memo that previously prohibited ICE from going into schools, places of worship, and hospitals known as sensitive locations, and said that basically they could now go in there if they needed to. Lyons was clear, though, that they aren't doing sweeps like they would do in a neighborhood or a Home Depot parking lot in a school, trying to assure them that schools are still considered safe places. He also said that sometimes they need to go into schools if there is a child that crossed the border unaccompanied and they have since been unaccounted for once they've been placed with a U.S. sponsor. He said that's really much more of a welfare check and something that he very much deeply felt that ICE did need to have the right to do, to go into schools to check on the whereabouts of those children that may have fallen off the radar of U.S. officials who are trying to check in on their welfare. But as far as schools go, this is a big reason why we see a lot of community activism around schools. People will often wait by bus stops. We see brigades of parents who are taking children to school if the parents are not feeling comfortable leaving their own home to take their kids to school. And that is exactly what we were told was happening just yesterday in Minneapolis before this incident took place, that they were nearby a school and you heard those whistles. People were trying to alert people in the area and people who might be going to school that ICE was
And it's a shame that people gotta do it.
Yeah, stay with us here as we're staying in our live coverage. And I want to remind folks that any minute we expect to see Vice President Vance take to the microphone there at the White House inside the briefing room. Kind of unexpected, candidly. We heard this morning that he would be showing up and speaking. He has been active, of course, online, talking about this, defending the administration and specifically the ICE agents' response in Minneapolis. And as we talk, I want to bring back in Tom Winter, too, because Tom, Secretary Noem also defended the way that this investigation is proceeding. And she has said that she is frustrated with the way that Minnesota, she says, and officials in Minneapolis have not been cooperating cooperative with some of these ICE operations, including this most recent surge.
That's right. That's something that Homeland Security has questions and complaints about in a number of cities, not exclusive to Minneapolis, New York being one of them. There was a question that came up in the course of that press conference, Hallie, that I thought was quite interesting. He's a competitor of mine, but I thought it was really sharp, and it's a question I've had, which is, will the Department of Homeland Security review the publicity that surrounds their actions in these cities? And one of the things that's been a little bit surprising to me, and I don't cover ICE, I don't cover parts of the DHS, more focused on other law enforcement agencies, but in looking at this in its totality, when we talk about the interaction, to your question, between local policing, FBI, DHS, ICE, all the components here, you would not see a circumstance where the FBI in New York or its leaders, there would be a leak of somehow saying, today we're going to go after the mafia in New York and we're going to surge agents to these places. You would not see in other cities a local police department say, today we're going after all drug dealers or we're going to surge a presence for the next several weeks. Now, to be clear, it's not always that DHS is blasting out on social media, oh, we're coming to Minneapolis in the coming couple of days, but they have talked at different points about searching about it. It's information that has definitely gotten out to reporters as far as the amount of agents that are there. And today, the DHS secretary in response to that question says, look, we don't put out that type of information in advance, but then later said, or said at a different point in that press conference, that she reserves the right to send more agents and more officers from ICE to Minneapolis. So when you're conducting these types of law enforcement operations in the middle of the day, in broad daylight, it does make it easy for individuals to intercede, and it certainly ratchets up the temperature. So there are questions in law enforcement circles today as to whether or not DHS should reconsider, and I should reconsider the way that they roll out these enforcement and removal operations. Should this be done more covertly? Should these operations be done in a manner or in a fashion where they're more targeted? Because when you see these types of scenarios where ICE is out in the community, is it safe for the ICE officers to be so blatant and out in the open, and then you create potential flashpoints, the likes of which we've seen yesterday. So it is definitely a question. Julie referenced the car stops that we've seen in other cities. We both have been talking about the enforcement and removal operations that could happen with schools. And so I think those are all questions that people have when you do law enforcement operations in the open like that. It does create the potential for issues with the public, and that obviously can lead to officer
What they gotta
safety
be at the
issues, can lead to
schools
safety
for?
issues for the public. So
They
I
ain't
think
got
that's
no
something
reason
that
to
we're
be at
gonna
the
watch here,
schools.
in the
Why they
coming
out
days
there?
After this incident in Minneapolis, will there be a
Y'all
change
got no
in,
reason to
in the
be
way
at the
ICE
schools.
conducts these
Why y'all out there?
Tom Winter, thank you. Let me go back to Minneapolis here, where Stephen Romo is on the ground near the scene of that shooting. And Stephen, I know we're learning more about the woman who was killed here, 37-year-old Renee Good.
Yeah, we know that the Minneapolis City Council described Good as a resident who was caring for her neighbors when she was killed. Her mother actually also spoke to the Minnesota Star Tribune, Donna Ganger, and she called her daughter one of the kindest people I've ever known. Something that we heard from Governor Walz in that press conference was he said that Good's character has been decided by people who do not know her. I've heard that same sentiment echoed from people in Minneapolis today, saying that it didn't seem like she was an agitator. It didn't seem like she was doing anything aggressive. Of course, judging just by that video that we've seen of the tragic shooting that ended her life. But the summary judgment of who she was seems to be upsetting people on the ground here as well. Protesters behind me have gathered at the place where she was shot and killed yesterday. The outrage stirred from that killing now bleeding over, and it's also being aimed at ICE itself. Other protesters this morning have gathered at the location downtown, Federal Building, where is acting as ICE headquarters here in Minneapolis, more or less right now, aiming that anger, that outrage directly at ICE. We heard the mayor telling them to get out of the city in very strong language yesterday, all because of the loss of this 37-year-old mom who was here in Minneapolis And the picture that we're being presented by neighbors, by family members, and the one that we're hearing from federal authorities not matching up right now, and it is causing a lot more outrage, a lot more anger in the city, Hallie.
Stephen, thank you. Julie, let me go back to you because as Stephen talks about the moment and the sort of tension and the feeling in Minneapolis right now, there's a question mark around a potential surge of more federal agents, specifically from Border Patrol. You have made note of the presence of Greg Bovino. Explain that and why that's relevant here to what could happen in Minneapolis in the hours ahead.
That's right. That was the first thing that I noticed at Kristi Noem's press conference last night. There was a man standing next to her with a groomed haircut and dressed in the green Border Patrol uniform, and he's hard to miss. That's Greg Bovino. And you may have seen him in LA as tensions rose there over the summer. You may have seen him in Chicago. He was actually throwing tear gas canisters into a crowd of protesters. He was a little-known sector chief along the border in El Centro, California. Then he was basically promoted into this newly formed position as commander of the Border Patrol. And now he goes around usually with a team of about 250 Border Patrol agents, 2 different cities. They did Los Angeles, Chicago, Charlotte, most recently New Orleans. And some of these tactics that he uses have been brought with lawsuits. And so now he is commanding more than 100 Border Patrol in Minneapolis.
Julia Ainsley, thank you. Let me take you back to the White House here, where our White House correspondent Monica Alba is joining us. And Monica, we know that the Vice President is going to be in the briefing room here, taking questions from reporters alongside the press secretary, right?
That's
right, Hallie. And the Vice President really has been weighing in on this shooting throughout the day. Today, he also offered some kind of opinion and analysis from his own assessment on this, which I think we can expect to hear him share from the podium. And he is responding to some online on social media who have been really calling out ICE, have been raising questions about the actions of this officer, and he is responding to them and some of the claims and questions that they're raising, saying that it's preposterous to assume anything other than what the White House position has been, which again, I think you're going to hear elaborated on from the Vice President and from the Press Secretary. And according to the Vice President, he is saying that this woman in the vehicle did not wave the officers through. Again, there is an angle that shows this woman in the vehicle at some point waving a vehicle through, but he claims that she basically has no right to do so, even if that is what she was doing. Again, this is the Vice President's own words. And that he argues she's waving another car through before the officers approach her car. So I think the Vice President is going to be sharing a lot of his own, again, assessment on this. But the real question that we have, Hallie, is what he's basing that off of. There's additional information that's been shared with the administration that hasn't been made public that we would all like to know. Great point, Monica. Great questions all. Thank you very much. Our Kelly O'Donnell in the room and may have an opportunity to get questions to the Vice President, to the Press Secretary. We're going to bring that to you live when it begins. There's been a bit of a delay, but for now, stick with us on NBC News for our continuing coverage right here and on NBCNews.com. I'm Hallie Jackson. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you soon.
News senior correspondent Tom Costello shows us the changes that could be coming to your next flight.
It can often be just plain difficult for airline passengers.
I needed to send out one thing. It took me an hour and 37 minutes into the flight for me to do that. One thing! I couldn't connect.
But connecting to the internet mid-flight is now getting another big boost. Tuesday, American Airlines announced plans to offer free high-speed Wi-Fi for Advantage members. Americans' frequent flyer program.
Is that it? Shoot, that's it. Hold on, y'all. Let me find. There we go. White House press briefing. Here we go. This is the White House press briefing, and most likely J.D. Vance is going to try to bullshit everybody.
Are we winning or losing again?
Too soon to tell.
Remind me again, why did I pick the specialty?
Anything else would be boring as hell.
I can't tell you how proud I am of all of you.
We'll get through this together.
Blink and get more with new 2K Plus Smart Security. With Blink 2K Plus, get set up in minutes to see every detail in crisp 2K video. Get noise cancellation for clearer two-way talk.
Hey, perfect timing.
Get wireless power for up to 2 years of battery life. Plus, with smart detection, you always know who's there. Plug in or battery power. Get Blink 2K Plus and get more with smart security for less.
The White House briefing should start at any moment.
Started with anti-inflammatory diet, and at first I was nervous I wouldn't have a ton of options, but Hungry Root made it so easy. Everything's delicious, fresh, and actually makes me feel good after I eat. It's so nice knowing I don't have to spend hours cooking or meal planning anymore. I used to overthink every meal, but now I can just grab what's in my fridge and know it fits my diet and tastes great.
Okay, they're still ain't live yet. Let me see news now.
Law and order in the United States of America.
Here we go.
The deadly incident that took place in Minnesota yesterday occurred as a result of a larger, sinister, left-wing movement that has spread across the country, where our brave men and women of federal law enforcement are under organized attack. Right now,
Liar,
immigration and
liar,
customs enforcement
liar.
officers are facing a 1,200% increase in assaults, a 3,200%
What's the proof of that at?
rammings, and an 8,000% increase in death threats. ICE agents are faithfully enforcing federal law to protect the safety of the American people by removing criminal illegal aliens from our country, which is exactly what nearly 80 million Americans elected President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance to do. Radicals in the Democrat Party are furious over this. They don't want our border secured or criminal illegal aliens being removed. As a result, Democrats are impeding immigration enforcement operations daily, creating extremely heightened and dangerous circumstances that make it nearly impossible for the men and women of law enforcement to simply do their jobs. Democrats are calling to defund federal law enforcement agencies who are protecting public safety. And Democrats are calling to abolish ICE and defund the police. That will never be allowed to happen under this president and vice president. The Trump administration will redouble our efforts to get the worst of the worst, criminal illegal alien killers, rapists, and pedophiles off of American streets. The Department of Homeland Security will continue to operate on the ground in Minnesota, not only to remove criminal illegal aliens, but also to continue conducting door-to-door investigations of the rampant fraud that has taken place in the state under the failed and corrupt leadership of Democrat Governor Tim Walz. Taxpayers have been ripped off to the tune of billions of dollars.
Why are y'all sitting here playing politics?
And that is going to end, and people are going to be held.
This here is supposed to be about a woman who got shot, not about politics.
Doubled the number of U.S. attorneys in the DOJ office in Minneapolis and surged resources to hold fraudsters accountable and demand justice for law-abiding American taxpayers and citizens across our country. And that's what brings the Vice President out here with me today to discuss all the Trump administration is doing and to make an additional important announcement on this front. So please, Mr. Vice President, will be joining us now.
Great. Well, good afternoon, everybody. And I want to echo some of what Carolyn said about what we're doing to combat the rampant fraud that exists in our immigration system, thanks to failed politicians and thanks to people who allow the American taxpayer to be taken advantage of for far too long. I think it's important to understand why this matters to the American people. I am a father of 3 young kids, a lot of kids, a lot of people in my generation. What's that going on here? Is that normal? Okay. CNN installed this broken camera just to throw me off my game, but it's not going to work. So here's the simple.
This is the Mercy Capital Corps empowered by artificial intelligence. Detective Raven, you're charged with the murder of your wife.
I'm not guilty.
You have 90 minutes to prove it, or you will be executed.
Use the tools.
Every camera, cell phone, and database is at your disposal.
Show me everyone she had contact with. She was seeing someone solve the mystery. Can I see my daughter's socials?
Sheila?
Someone was in my basement for face execution.
You're running out of time.
Bring that back. We might have something there. Oh my God. Mercy impeaching their team only leaders January 20th.
Actually activated a major interagency task force to make it possible to get to the heart of this fraud. We have Department of Agriculture resources that are focused on SNAP fraud, so that people who need food benefits can get them, but illegal aliens and other fraudsters don't. We have over 1,500 subpoenas the Department of Justice has issued to get to the heart of the fraud ring. We've done almost 100 indictments, mostly Somali immigrants, but also a few others. And of course, we're looking in with broad investigatory authority to a number of the instances of wrongdoing that we've seen in Minneapolis. But we also want to expand this. We know that the fraud isn't just happening in Minneapolis, it's also happening in states like Ohio. It's happening in states like California. And so what we're doing in order to help coordinate this remarkable interagency effort from the Trump administration, but also to make sure that we prosecute the bad guys and do it as swiftly and efficiently as possible, is we are creating a new Assistant Attorney General position who will have nationwide jurisdiction over the issue of fraud. Now, of course, that person's efforts will start and focus primarily in Minnesota, but it is going to be a nationwide effort because, unfortunately, the American people have been defrauded in a very nationwide way. I want to thank a couple of people for their cooperation, in particular Pam Bondi, our Attorney General. First of all, for getting a lot of resources to Minneapolis to investigate and prosecute this fraud, really at an industrial scale. We've never seen fraud like this in the history of our country. Pam has been doing a great job to get the resources there to uncover it, but importantly, creating a job like this often takes months, sometimes even longer. When we realized that we needed this Associate Attorney General position, Pam got this person up and running in about a week. We're going to make the nomination hopefully in the next few days. We'll obviously let you guys know who that is when we do it. I've talked to Senate Majority Leader John Thune, who has promised me swift confirmation for this official, but this is the person who is going to make sure that we stop defrauding the American people. Here's one final thing I'll say about this. I've heard a lot of people say that we need a special counsel to investigate fraud in the United States of America. I actually agree, and that's what this position does. It has all the benefits, all the resources, all the authority of a special counsel, but with two crucial differences. Number one, it will be run out of the White House under the supervision of me and the President of the United States. And number two, it's actually constitutionally legitimate. As you guys may know, the special counsel statute has some major constitutional questions. When we get the bad guys, we want to make sure we get them permanently and they don't have some legal technicality they can get out of, which is why we set it up as an associate attorney general. I'll take some questions, but I want to make just one final observation here. When I was actually walking out here, somebody sent me a photo of a CNN headline about what happened in Minneapolis. And this is the headline, I'm just going to read it. Outrage after ICE officer kills U.S. citizen in Minneapolis. Well, that's one way to put it, and that is the way that many people in the corporate media have put this attack over the last 24 hours. And I say attack very, very intentionally, because this was an attack on federal law enforcement, this was an attack on law and order, this was an attack on the American people. The way that the media...
Wait a minute, how was this an attack on American people, JD?
Absolute
How?
disgrace, and it puts our law enforcement officers at risk every single day.
How, JD?
What that headline leaves out is the fact that that very ICE officer nearly had his life ended, dragged by a car 6 months ago, 33 stitches in his leg. So you think maybe he's a little bit sensitive about somebody ramming him with an automobile? What that headline leaves out is that that woman was there to interfere with a legitimate law enforcement operation in the United States of America. What that headline leaves out is that that woman has, as part of a broader left-wing network, to attack, to dox, to assault, and to make it impossible for our ICE officers to do their job. If the media wants to tell the truth, they ought to tell the truth that a group of left-wing radicals have been working tirelessly, sometimes using domestic terror techniques to try to make it impossible for the President of the United States to do what the American people elected him to do, which is enforce our immigration laws. The President stands with ICE, I stand with ICE, we stand with all of our law enforcement officers. And part of that is recognizing that you people in the media, not everybody in this room, but many people in this room have been lying about this attack. She was trying to ram this guy with her car. He shot back. He defended himself. He's already been seriously wounded in law enforcement operations before, and everybody who's been repeating the lie that this is some innocent woman who was out for a drive in Minneapolis when a law enforcement officer shot at her, you should be ashamed of yourself. Every single one of you. Questions?
Mr. President, I was looking at the wall earlier today that when things look good, this is the first that outlines the nation on July 3rd, 1866.
Kiss my ass,
And I think we may be in that moment now. Can you comment on his rhetoric and Mayor Jacob Frey and whether they want to see unrest in Minneapolis?
Well, that's very tough rhetoric from a guy who just quit because his fraudulent activities have been uncovered. Look, Tim Walz is a joke. His entire administration has been a joke. The idea that he's some sort of freedom fighter, he's not. He's a guy who has enabled fraud and maybe in fact has participated in fraud. That's what this new Assistant Attorney General position is going to find out. I don't care what Tim Walz says. I care about getting to the bottom of this fraud for the American people, and I care about enforcing the nation's immigration laws. That's what we're going to stay focused on.
Unrelated question here. I mean, Democrats will have accused ICE of murder. These are just hurting Americans. They told ICE to get the F out of Minnesota. This is what has stoked the fire against ICE agents. We're talking about ICE agents right now. What, if anything, is the administration going to do to make sure these folks are protected during these protests? But also, should DHS sort of revisit their procedures here? Nobody wants to see Americans killed. Are there changes that need to be made to make sure something like this doesn't happen again?
But first of all, of course, nobody wants an American citizen to be killed. This is absolutely a tragedy. But it's a tragedy of the making of the far left. They have radicalized a very small segment of the population, taught them that ICE agents are engaging in wide-scale violation of people's rights. What our ICE officers are doing is deporting the millions of criminal aliens that were let in during the Biden administration. So number one, we have to say, as a matter of leadership, and I would appreciate if the Democrats would join me on this, let's be honest about the fact that we have way too many illegal aliens in this country. Our ICE officers should be supported in doing their job. You're trying to actually marshal the far left lunatic fringe to engage in doxing, to try to make it impossible for them to enforce the law, and in some cases actually to engage in acts of domestic terrorism against our law enforcement officers. When you talk about different plans, different protocols, different policies, I forget exactly how you asked the question. Here's the simple fact. What we're going to do is make it easier for the American People's Administration to enforce the American People's law. And that means that Democrats have to stop rallying the mob against legitimate law enforcement operations. And that means that we are going to get tougher. And that's what this AAG position is about. We're going to get tougher at the people who are defrauding the United States by inciting violence against our law enforcement officers. That's one of the things that we're going to do. We've already started that work at the Department of Justice. We're going to keep on doing it, and this new AAG position is going to kick that into high gear.
Vice President Vance, you just suggested that this woman who was killed, Renee Good, is part of a broader left-wing network. Who do you think is behind this broader left-wing network?
Well, it's one of the things we're going to have to figure out, but here's the way that I put it. When somebody throws a brick at an ICE agent, or somebody tries to run over an ICE agent, who paid for the brick? And who told protesters to show up and engage in violent activity against our law enforcement officers? You see, just with this most recent terrible incident in Minneapolis, you see friends of this woman's or other people who are eyewitnesses saying basically that she was there to engage in obstruction of a legitimate law enforcement operation. How did she get there? How did she learn about this? There's an entire network, and frankly, some of the media are participating in it, that is trying to incite violence against our law enforcement officers. It's ridiculous, it's preposterous, and part of our investigatory work is getting to the bottom of it.
What about the policies you support, though, JD?
Of course, if there's illegal activity related to that, we're going to get to the bottom of that and prosecute it where we can.
Vice President, thank you for taking questions today. Is there a risk with you describing her as deranged leftist, talking about very specific facts of these events, when an investigation is just beginning? Are you preempting a thorough investigation by drawing such conclusions? And have you received any information beyond the videos we've seen publicly about this individual, her specific acts, that has informed your point here?
Well, first of all, the Department of Justice is going to investigate this. The Department of Homeland Security is already investigating this. But the simple fact is, what you see is what you get in this case. You have a woman who was trying to obstruct a...
Okay, sorry, y'all. I'm back. I was eating.
You have a woman who aimed her car at a law enforcement officer and pressed on the accelerator.
She did not aim the car at him. She was trying to get around him, JD. You lying son of a bitch.
The far left who has marshaled an entire movement, a lunatic fringe against our law enforcement officers. I think what is clearly happening here, and it's going to keep on happening.
You're so full of fucking shit.
You know what? You don't have to agree with our immigration policies. You don't have to agree with what the president or the vice president believe about immigration enforcement. But why don't you take this to the ballot box? Why don't you vote? Why don't you organize? Instead, what some of them are doing is encouraging people to get violent with our law enforcement officials. It's disgraceful, and it's got to stop.
Yeah. Just to follow up on that question, again, thank you for taking questions, Mr. Vice President. There's clearly a lot of emotion in Minnesota, across the country, over this incident. You're calling Renee Good a deranged leftist. There's been heated rhetoric that we've also heard from officials. What responsibility do you and the president have to diffuse some of the tension that we are seeing play out in Minnesota, bring down the temperature as this investigation is unfolding?
What we have a responsibility to do is to protect the people who are enforcing the law and protect the country writ large. Whether you're Democrat or Republican, you deserve to have the people's laws enforced in the United States of America. Now again, I'm not happy that this woman lost her life. I'm not happy that this woman was there at a protest violating the law by interfering with a law enforcement action. I think that we can all recognize that the best way to turn down the temperature is to tell people to take their concerns about immigration policy to the ballot box. Stop assaulting and stop inciting violence against our law enforcement officers. That's the best way to take down the temperature. And we're not going to give in to terrorism on this. And that's exactly what's happened. People trying to antagonize, to commit acts of violence, they throw bricks at them, sometimes they shoot at them, sometimes they dox them, sometimes they go to their place of residence and harass their families. This is classic terrorism, and we cannot say...
Oh, so let me get it straight. Protesting is terrorism. Okay, got you.
We're no longer going to enforce the law. That's rewarding the very people who are engaged in this garbage. The actual reward that they just got is a new assistant attorney general who is going to prosecute and investigate this stuff even more aggressively than before. Yeah.
Thank you for your question. So the head of Minnesota's investigation in this agency said that the U.S. Attorney's Office has essentially cut off the state investigations agency's access to the investigation. What is the precedent for that, and why shouldn't the Minnesota officials on the ground have access and evidence to work on this investigation?
First of all, I wish the state officials in Minnesota would investigate why you have so many people who are using their vehicles and other means to actually interfere with a legitimate law enforcement operation. The precedent here is very simple. You have a federal law enforcement official engaging in federal law enforcement action. That's a federal issue. That guy is protected by absolute immunity. He was doing his job. The idea that Tim Walz and a bunch of radicals in Minneapolis are going to go after
You are so full of shit, JD.
because he was doing the job that he was asked to do is preposterous. The unprecedented thing is the idea that a local official can actually prosecute a federal official with absolute immunity. I've never seen anything like that. It would get tossed out by a judge. So what I'd like Minnesota to focus on is the real issue that they're encouraging people. Minneapolis officials are encouraging people to commit violence against ICE officials. It's ridiculous. It's got to stop. Go ahead.
Mr. President, thank you. You said earlier that there's a left-wing network to attack, to dox, to assault, and make it impossible for ICE officers to do their job. You told my colleague just now that there's an investigation going on to that network.
Yeah.
So if everything that you say is true, how does being part of that network justify being shot?
Well, being part of the network doesn't justify being shot, but ramming an ICE officer with your car, that's what justifies being shot. It's not a good thing, by the way.
She didn't even. She was going around him, JD.
Preposterous question.
Lord.
Funding some of this stuff.
You lying sack of shit.
Nobody would suggest that. The reason this woman is dead is because she tried to ram somebody with her car, and that guy acted in self-defense. That is
Lies.
why she lost her life.
Lies.
It's a tragedy.
Lies.
There may be other violations of the law and other penalties that are associated with those violations of the law. For example, if you are funding violence against our law enforcement officers, I'm not a prosecutor. My guess is that's not the sort of thing that earns capital punishment, but it should sure as hell earn you a few years in prison if you're funding the effort to try to assault our law enforcement officers. What is, I'm sorry guys, what's going on here? You guys are meant to report the truth. How have you let yourself become agents of propaganda of a radical fringe that's making it harder for us to enforce our laws? You just asked me a question that presumed that the reason why this woman died is because...
This right here, ladies and gentlemen, is the political version of shame, guilt, insults, and it need to be right.
She was engaged in a protest. She tried to run somebody over with her car, and the guy defended himself when that happened. Next question. I said next question.
Watch the video for yourself. There's not the slightest doubt in your mind, having viewed it, that the victim, you still believe that she deliberately tried to ram him despite seeing this video.
Look, I don't know what is in a person's heart or in a person's head, and obviously we're not going to get the chance to ask this woman what was going on. What I am certain of is that she violated the law. What I'm certain of is that that officer had every reason to think that he was under very serious threat for injury or in fact, his life. What I'm certain of
You are
is
so
that she
full of
accelerated
shit.
in a way where she ran into the guy. I don't know what was in her heart and what was in her head, but I know that she violated the law, and I know that officer was acting in self-defense. It raises an interesting point that, look, if people want to say that we should have a legitimate debate about, what was she really doing, right? Was she panicking when she drove into this officer, or was she actually trying to ram him? That's a reasonable conversation. What's not reasonable is for so many of you to plaster all over the media that this was an innocent woman and that the ICE agent committed murder, which is what many
Which he
of you have said
did.
explicitly and some of you have said implicitly. That's what I have an objection to. The idea that this was not justified is absurd. I think everybody knows it in their heart. Yeah. In a green jacket.
Taking down the temperature, it seems like political violence is ratcheting up and riots could be around the corner. What steps does the administration have planned to try to unite America? Average people on both political sides are so tired of fighting with each other, and I think all the journalists in this room could agree with me that we don't want to be part of the problem. Do you have any words to unite America?
I know you don't want to be part of the problem, and I think that's true of a lot of you. I'm not sure it's true for everybody. because the reporting over this has been one of the biggest scandals I've ever seen in media. I've never seen a case so misrepresented and misreported when you have a guy who was defending himself and is now being treated as some sort of federal assassin by so many of the people in this room. First of all, let me say about crime. You mentioned violence. One of the things we're proudest about is that you saw
He is
violent
so
crime
full of
last year
shit.
drop by 20%. Why is that drop by 20%? Is it because we're attacking our law enforcement officers, or is it because we in the administration are empowering our law enforcement officers?
You're a world-class bullshitter,
Start
bro.
your year with Whoop. To train smarter, sleep deeper, recover faster, so you can add more years to your life and more life to your years. Shop Whoop.
¿Apostarías por mí? El primer reality 24/7 que pondrá a hablar a todo el continente.
It accrues to the benefit of the entire national community. I think that we can absolutely talk about the ways in which, you know, we can lower the temperature by discussing differences in a reasonable and rational way. Again, I'm happy to talk with any congressional Democrat.
Damn, I can't even read the chat because the chat going so fast.
I think it's in the best interest of the country, about why the President of the United States was elected to actually enforce the border for the first time in at least 4 years. So here's the problem. That's not the debate so many people are having. They are actively covering for people who are committing acts of violence against federal law enforcement. It is preposterous. The way to take down the temperature is to stop it. Have your debates about policy. Attack me. Attack the President of the United States. Don't attack our law enforcement officers. They are trying to do the job the American people demanded that they do. They are not policy actors. They are enforcing the law. They should be treated with a modicum of dignity and respect. And the fact that they're not is why incidents like yesterday happened. One final point I'll make about this is, look, there's a part of me that feels very, very sad for this woman, not just because she lost her life, but because I think she is a victim of left-wing ideology. What young mother shows up and decides they're going to throw their car in front of ICE officers who are enforcing legitimate law? You've got to be a little brainwashed to get to that point to where you're willing, not just to protest, that's fine, not peacefully protest, but throw your vehicle in front of legitimate law enforcement officers and drive your car to them. To get to that point, you have to be, I think, radicalized in a very, very sad way. I certainly wish that she hadn't got there. I know there's an ICE officer right now who very much wishes he was not put in the position where he had to fire a gun to defend his own life. Yeah.
What's your message, following up on that, what's your message to the leaders in Minnesota, the governor of Minnesota, the mayor of Minneapolis, to calm down the situation on the ground, on the streets? What's your message also to those protesters who saw that video in a completely different way than you saw that video?
Well, first of all, I think if you watch every angle of that video, there is one angle where if you squint, you can maybe tell yourself that it's not clear what happened. But when you look at all angles of that video, it is very clear that her vehicle went right for the guy, she actually collided with him, and then that's, of course, when he fired his shots. That's obvious, okay? So what I say to the protesters is by all means protest peacefully, but make this about ideas. Make this about disagreement with our policy. Don't use your protest as a justification or an encouragement for people to go and incite violence and participate in violence against our law enforcement officials. To the people on the ground in Minneapolis, meaning the local officials in Minneapolis from Tim Walz on down, I'd say, look, why can't you just disagree with a given piece of immigration policy without turning law enforcement into the enemy? And what, I mean, where a police officer goes and arrests somebody because they violated a criminal law, if you're mad about that, go and protest the politician who passed that law. Don't attack the police officer who's just doing their job. We had a wide open border under Joe Biden. I happen to think it's a good thing the President of the United States has closed it down. If you think that's a bad idea, criticize this administration for a policy decision. Don't attack our people for enforcing the law, because I guarantee you go to ICE, there are black people and white people, there are Democrats and Republicans, they are patriotic Americans who are trying to enforce the law. Attack me, lay off of our ICE agents. Yeah, in the blue, all the way, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Vice President. You called on Tim Walz to resign. Can you lay out the case as to why he should step down?
Well, look, I think Tim Walz should resign because it's very clear either that he knew about the fraud in Minneapolis, he knew about the welfare fraud, or at the very least he looked the other way. I mean, this is not like Lex Luthor, right? This is not movie villain fraud. This is the lowest IQ possible fraud. This is, we're going to take we're going to take the absence of kids and set up a daycare center where there are no children, and we're going to call our early childhood education center the Quality Learning Center.
I don't even care about these politics y'all playing. This is about a woman who died.
Rich off of this. We know that there were schools who either had no enrollment or at least they overstated their enrollment. Tim Walz either was unbelievable incompetence or he was in on the fraud. That's one of the things we're going to get to the bottom of. Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Can you explain the difference between this Associate Attorney General and a special counsel? And do you envision this being a permanent position or having more of a limited scope?
Well, it's going to be permanent until we get to the bottom of what's going on, so I think it's going to last for at least the remainder of the administration. What's different about it from a special counsel is, if you remember, the Jack Smith case where the special counsel was found unconstitutional, one of the big issues there is that that person was not an appointed person, completely aside from all the other issues, that the person was a lunatic and that the case had no merit. There was a fundamental constitutional issue, which is that he had not been appointed by the president and he had not been confirmed by the United States Senate. An assistant attorney general, what that's going to allow us to do is appoint this person, have them confirmed by the Senate. That's one difference. The more substantive difference.
So in other words, another stooge.
Of a very broad interagency White House that's been led by the President of the United States on down, and that's going to give them the resources, the access to material and information to make this person more effective. I think a lot of people have asked, how are you really going to get to the heart of the fraud? We've been asking ourselves that question for the past couple of months, and we think this is the critical piece at the Department of Justice to really ramp this fraud investigation into high gear. In the red tie, yeah.
Vice President Vance, I wanted to ask, what's your message to far leftist agitators who feel emboldened to obstruct ICE activity in Minnesota and around the country?
Well, I think they shouldn't feel emboldened because now they have an assistant attorney general who is going to prosecute and investigate their fraud and their violence more aggressively than it has ever been investigated in the United States of America. We are doing so much to try to find the financing networks and the domestic terrorism networks that legitimate this violence, that fund this violence, and then of course engage in the violence. These people should not feel emboldened because they have, for the first time, maybe in American history, an administration that is not going to tolerate political violence of any kind from anywhere. Yeah.
It's not clear today that the entire way the federal government is behind ICE agents and this ICE agent in particular. There is still a federal investigation happening on the ground. Does that mean that they are not looking into this ICE agent at all? They are just focused on the woman who was in the car? What is the investigation if the federal government has already determined that its weight is behind this ICE investigation?
So what do you mean? When you say investigation, do you mean investigation of the shooting yesterday or of the fraud that's happening in Minneapolis? Okay, look, DHS, as I understand it, has an investigation already ongoing. I know that other organs of our government are looking at this. So yes, there's certainly an investigation that's happening right now. But as part of the broader fraud investigation, a lot of what we're doing with the Department of Justice has already started. We've got over 1,500 subpoenas. We've got people this morning, actually. We're going door to door to actually knock on some of these fraudulent care centers, these fraudulent social services organizations to get to the bottom of what's going on there. So the investigation in some ways has already been ramping up into the anti-fraud element for at least a few weeks. What we're trying to do is supercharge it and make sure there's a designated person within the Department of Justice who completely controls that particular focus.
Just to follow up on that, Mr. Vice President, on the agent, is he still on duty or has he been placed on leave, on administrative leave? And what really was the target of the operation on Wednesday? ICE operation on Wednesday?
Well, first of all, it was a legitimate law enforcement operation. We were going door to door to try to find criminal illegal aliens and deport them from the United States of America, because if you come to our country illegally in violation of our immigration laws, then we have the mandate, and in fact, we have the legal duty to enforce those immigration laws. Whether he's been placed on administrative leave, I don't know the answer to that question. I've referred to the Department of Homeland Security, and they can follow up. I will say, look, I would appreciate everybody saying a prayer for that agent. Look, in the past 6 months, he has been hit twice by a motor vehicle. One time, the first time, it led to over 30 stitches and very serious injuries to his legs. This is a guy who's actually done a very, very important job for the United States of America. He's been assaulted, he's been attacked, he's been injured because of it. He deserves a debt of gratitude, and I think the media prejudging and talking about this guy as if he's a murderer is one of the most disgraceful things I've ever seen.
Here's one.
Yeah.
Vice President, what is your specific role in the future of Venezuela? And I'm wondering, could you confirm reports that...
Why are we talking about everything but the woman who passed away in Minnesota?
So I've heard a couple of things. One, that I was kept out of the planning for the Venezuela operation, that's false. And another, that Tulsi was kept out of the planning for Venezuela operations, that's completely false. Look, we're all part of the same team. And one of the things that is really amazing about that operation is that we kept it very tight to the senior cabinet level officials and related officials in our government. And we kept this operation secret for a very long time. I'm very proud of that. I suggest the team works very well together. Well, looking ahead, what is my role? Look, my role is going to be whatever the president asks me to do. Well, every single, or I should say every other day, I'm chairing the meeting that we do on this among White House principals to talk about next steps to try to ensure that Venezuela is stable, and as the president has directed us to do, to ensure that the new Venezuelan government actually listens to...
You mean a country that you guys hijacked?
...to do under our country's best interest. So I'm going to be as involved as the president wants me to be. So far, that's
Let me
been very
pause
involved, and I'll keep on doing that so long.
You forgot to mention, JD, on how you guys kidnapped the president of that country and then hijacked the country so he could have access to his oil. Talk about the elephant in the room, JD.
The president asked me to do that. Sorry, we'll go purple and then we'll go pink, whatever that is in front.
Oh, hey, smell the roses.
Are there any
Hey, Raquel.
Are there any indications that the lady who was shot? I know there are different reports from there. Her wife said they were new to the area. Are there any indications she may have been a paid agitator, or maybe that there are others that were brought to the area, considering everything that's going on in Minneapolis?
I wouldn't say that she was paid. I don't have the evidence to say that one way or the other. I do know that she was violating the law. And if you just look at the eyewitness accounts, they were saying she was there to prevent the enforcement of the law. She was trying to obstruct a legitimate law enforcement operation. That much is obviously clear. The rest of it, of course, is part of the reason why we investigate this stuff. Yeah.
Vice President, even beyond the War Powers resolution today, Congress has bucked President Trump on issues like tariffs. Are you concerned that President Trump is losing his grip on Republicans in the Congress, and what are you going to do about it?
No, I'm not concerned at all. First of all, we talked to some of the senators who were going to vote the wrong way, in my view, on this resolution today. Much of their argument was based more on a legal technicality than any disagreement in policy. If you look at the people who actually voted, every single one of them have supported the administration's plan. Second of all, as the president, I believe himself, has already said, every president, Democrat or Republican, believes the War Powers Act is fundamentally a fake and unconstitutional law. It's not going to change anything about how we conduct foreign policy over the next couple of weeks, the next couple of months, and that'll continue to be how we approach things.
Speaking of you guys' foreign policy, what makes you think that your foreign policy is not in the crapper after Venezuela? Whether y'all like it or not, United States foreign policy is in the crapper just because of Venezuela alone. Let's continue.
We are seeing, regarding Iran, we're seeing the protests in Iran. They say the cities are begging for help from the U.S. and Israel, naming streets in the city after President Trump. It seems there is an opportunity here that may not come again. Will the United States stand by the citizens of Iran, and if Israel decides to strike again the nuclear sites in Iran, is the U.S. expected to take part?
Well, look, we certainly stand by anybody who's engaged in peaceful protests, anybody who's trying to exert their rights from free association and to have their voices heard. Obviously, the Iranian regime has a lot of problems, and as the President of the United States has said, The smartest thing for them to have done, it was true 2 months ago, it's true today, is for them to actually have a real negotiation with the United States about what we need to see when it comes to the nuclear program. I'll let the president speak to what we're going to do in the future, but we certainly stand with anybody across the world, including the Iranian people who are advocating for their rights. I'll take just a couple more questions. Yeah, go ahead.
Vice President, concerning Venezuela, how would you assure the Caribbean region that they will remain a zone of peace? Because some member states in the region are concerned.
Well, look, the president had a very productive phone call with the president of Colombia yesterday, and we continue to talk at all levels of government with a number of our friends in the Caribbean region. I actually think this is really good for peace in the Caribbean, because when you take away a major source of illegal cartel revenue, which is the cocaine trade, the fentanyl trade, other sources of illicit revenue, you actually remove the power of one of the main destabilizing forces in Latin America and in the Caribbean. I really do think, we say it all the time, this is the president of peace. One of the ways that you establish peace in your own hemisphere is to the United States is going to be respected, that the United States is willing to take power away from criminal cartel organizations.
You said Donald Trump is the president of peace. Where? I'm seriously asking the question. You said Donald Trump is the president of peace. Where?
And give it to legitimate governments. That's how we see the future of the Western Hemisphere, and we think it's going to be much more peaceful than it was certainly under Joe Biden.
Wrong. Y'all see the Western Hemisphere has been under y'all's control. And the reason I can say that is because of things you said in the past, JD, things that Trump said in the past, things that Janine Pirro said in the past, and even things that Elon Musk have said in the past. Y'all are a globalist administration. Excuse me. And what it means to be globalist is to basically expand your reach throughout the whole planet. And yes, Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, Pam Bundy, well, who else did I say? Marco Rubio, all them folks are globalists. I stand by what I said. Be back in a second, y'all.
Well, first of all, Secretary Rubio, I believe, is meeting with the leaders of Denmark and Greenland next week, I want to say it is, but maybe it's the week after that. We'll continue to deliver some of these messages in private, some of them in public, but I guess my advice to European leaders and anybody else would be to take the President of the United States seriously. What has he said about Greenland? Set to the side the crazy overreactions that I've seen from the press and from certain people in Europe. What has the President said? Number one, Greenland is really important, not just to America's missile defense, but to the world's missile defense. Number two, we know that there are hostile adversaries that have shown a lot of interest in that particular territory, that particular slice of the world. So what we're asking our European friends to do is to take the security of that landmass more seriously, because if they're not, the United States is going to have to do something about it. What that is, I'll leave that to the President as we continue to engage in diplomacy with our European friends and everybody on this particular topic. And again, thank you all for listening. Thanks for taking questions. And I just ask you, look, this is politics, and often Republicans and get in arguments with the press about things. And I understand that. I think it's really irresponsible for you guys to go out there and imply or tell the American people that a guy who defended himself from being rammed by an automobile is guilty of murder. Be a little bit more careful. We're going to talk about toning down the temperature, which I know the President wants to do, and I certainly want to do. One of the ways we tone down the temperature is to have a media that tells the truth. I encourage you all to do that. God bless you. Happy New Year, guys.
He is so full of shit. Oh my Lord. Let's go to somewhere else. This here is the Pascal show. Let's go.
Car pulls away like this, and he's like still going bang bang bang. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? He's still going like F you. bang, 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 or 2, sorry. He's like, bang, bang, point blank range. That woman was already gone, I'm sure, after the first shot.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be real.
Yeah, she was.
So again, yes, I get it. I've seen the footage. I've seen the footage for myself. We all have. We ain't. Then the other part is this standard training? Would you consider that standard training? You pull out a deadly weapon and brah. Huh? That's standard training. So before we go into, and of course, what say you guys? What say you guys on this? Okay, are you with that 100%? Do you agree with JD Vance with what he's saying here, or no? I put a poll. I put it on all the platforms. All right, because I'm trying to engage you guys on these other platforms as well. But some platforms don't have that feature. Some of them do. Okay, but I did put it up on as many of the platforms that I'm live on right now. All right, so make sure you are putting in that vote. Let me know your thoughts, because I'd like to know what your thoughts are on this. Okay, again, this is very, very interesting. This is a very interesting situation, nonetheless. Man, this is just crazy.
Too crazy.
So, and of course, I'm not, okay, one last thing about this, the JD Vance, okay? One last thing with JD Vance. I'm not surprised that he reacted and did a speech like this.
I'm not.
What we knew of JD Vance before is not the same JD Vance that is vice president right now. It is a completely different person. Remember that. So I'm not surprised by what JD Vance said here. Not at all. Not in no way, shape, or form am I surprised. Okay? Not surprised. So of course, he's going to say what he needs to. He's going to say what he says.
Yep.
How he's been saying it. And that narrative is never going to change.
Hell
Whatever
no.
the president says,
It ain't changing.
he's going to basically echo. There's no way on God's green earth he's ever going to oppose or go against Trump. It would have to be an absolutely polarizing and shocking moment. It will literally be us going, holy crap, we are most definitely in the upside down, if that is the case.
Yep.
But I don't see that happening anytime soon, because
It ain't gonna
he
happen.
sees the eye on the he has his eye on the prize. His eye on the prize is most definitely getting that presidential spot.
Bingo.
A beam. So before
He's
we go
he's
into
going,
these other things, in fact,
and JD's gonna do what he needs to do to get a chance to become president.
some protests, etc., going on. So I'm going to show you guys this as well. This is just, you know, like I said, this is all what's going on right now. Protests are happening. People are reacting. There's a lot going on. So make sure.
And mind you,
hit
the
all
protests
super
are
chats, memberships, and all
nationwide.
that, and I will get to that at the end of the show. I might sprinkle a couple of them throughout the show. And get to the majority of them near the end of the show, but that is the procedure that we've been doing for a long time, okay? Or for a while now, so just so you guys know. But again, please hit that like button down below, okay? I see a bunch of y'all in here. I'd love to get it to like 800 likes. That would be amazing. We're more than halfway there, so just hit that subscribe button while you're at it as well, okay? Now, here's the thing. There's a lot of rumor, there's a lot of speculation and all that, saying things like, you know, these particular people that are out here protesting and blah, blah, blah. I mean, that they're paid and etc. I don't believe that. I think these are all people that are very upset, very mad about what happened here. There are people on both sides of the aisle, on the Republican side of the aisle, that are actually saying that what happened here is tragic and was not right. That's what some people are saying on the other side of the fence. We are going to get into those in a little bit as well. So like I said, sit tight, get into the conversation. There's a lot going on here, but all I'm asking for you guys to do in the chat is to proceed with maturity. I understand that we're in the chat, family chat, and this is like the sandbox, but we can all still be adults while making our sandcastles, okay? So please be respectful. in the chat, okay? And just be kind to everybody, because at the end of the day, we are all we got in these situations. But now let me show you guys this. This is what's going on. Of course, there's still protests going on and whatnot. So let's take a look at a little bit of this, and then
I'm just gonna go ahead and end this here. I may come back later. I don't know. If I come back, I'll come back. If not, I'll come back tomorrow. Like, share, subscribe. I'll see y'all later. Peace.